At this point, when users log in, we're executing our token auth mutation and we're getting a JSON Web Token returned to us. How are we going to use this token to authenticate our users? Well, in particular, we want to do two things. When our user logs in, we want to kick them to the home page. We want to take them away from the login component. And the next thing we need to do is we need to provide this JSON Web Token on every request that they make afterwards. So a good first step would be to put this token in a place where we can retrieve it later if we need to re-authenticate the user. We can store our token in the browser with the help of local storage. So instead of just logging our token here within onCompleted of our mutation component, we can remove that and head up to handle submit. We can make handle submit an async await function so we can get the returned token from calling token auth, and we'll put it in a variable called res. So then we can easily put the token in local storage by saying local storage dot set item, and we need to provide a name for this item that we're putting in storage. We're going to call this auth token, and for the second argument we can provide the token itself with the path res.data.tokenauth.token. Now when we save login and we successfully log in a user, when we go to the console and look at the application tab, we should find in local storage, when we go to storage, local storage, that we have a new key value pair, the key name token auth, and for value it should be our JSON Web Token. Now let's take care of the first step, redirecting our user, or rather taking them to the home page away from our login component. Well, we want to tell our application whenever the page is refreshed, for example, to grab our auth token and then re-authenticate our user. So it would be nice if we could create some global state within our application where we store a user's authentication status based off of whether there is this auth token in local storage. Unfortunately, Apollo Boost comes with a very nice built-in storage system or state management system. If we head back to index.js within our source folder, when we instantiated a new Apollo client, it also gave us the ability to create a new object on it with the property name client state. And client state gives us the ability to manage certain values within our application across components very easily. This is because, first of all, Apollo client, with the help of our Apollo provider, is being made available to every component within our app. So that's why giving us this state management tool is very intuitive. And also what's interesting about it is that it gives us the ability to directly change values in this client state by reading and writing values from the client. In a second, we'll take a look at how we can actually directly access our Apollo client, our instantiated Apollo client, within our query and mutation components. But for right now, let's create some new client state. As we mentioned, this client state needs to be based off of whether our user is authenticated, and we want to tell it to first look in local storage to see if we have an auth token. So to do that, we can create some default values in client state by adding a defaults object, and within defaults we'll create one piece of state which we'll call is logged in. So if our user is logged in, if they're authenticated and they've been given an auth token, is logged in should be true. If the user is unauthenticated, it should be false. So to tell our client state to update, say whenever there's a page refresh, to update this is logged in value, we can just provide as the value to is logged in local storage dot get item and tell it to get our auth token value if there is one. And of course, when we get this item within storage, it's going to return our value, and it's going to return a string to be put as is logged in. And in order to convert that to a Boolean, we can just add the not operator twice. So this is a shorthand for converting a string value, or any value really, to a Boolean. So when our app loads, is logged in is going to be set to true or false, but how do we update this is logged in state? Naturally, we want to do that when a user logs in. Well, as I mentioned, we can directly access our instantiated client to do so to update our client state. So let's head back to our login component, and within our render props, we need to add a couple of more properties to provide our client to handle submit. After loading an error, we can destructure called, which is a Boolean that's returned that tells us whether this mutation's been executed or not. And then after called, we get the client itself. We'll pass our client to handle submit as a third argument. Then we'll add client as a parameter to handle submit. And then to set is logged in to true, we can take our client and use a method on it called writeData. And within an object, we get access to our client state data. It's going to be a property called data. And on the data object, we can access is logged in and pass it a value of true, like so. So a user logs in, and in our client state, is logged in is true. But what do we do to actually display the root component and take users away from the auth component? Well, the kind of cool and maybe strange aspect of client state is that we can actually query for this is logged in value. So we can write it exactly like we've been writing queries in the past. The only difference is that we're not going to make a network request with this query. It's going to be known as a client query. So to write this query and to conditionally show our component, we'll need to bring in the query component from React Apollo. We'll also need to bring in GQL from Apollo Boost. Then to write our query for is logged in, we're going to call this the is logged in query. Once again, we'll put it in a variable, and we'll write our query between the backticks of GQL, after GQL. Then we can just write a normal query. You don't have to have the query keyword. And then we can just ask for is logged in. And the way Apollo is going to know where to get this value from is we just need to add the client directive. So we say add client. It's going to get that value when we execute this particular query within our provider. And I'm going to remove the auth component just for a moment. And then we'll pass to our query prop the is logged in query we just made. And we'll add our render props. The only thing that we'll need to destructure from the function's parameters is data. And then based off of the data, we're going to have property on data called is logged in. And if is logged in is true, we want to show the root component. If they're unauthenticated, we want to show them the auth component. So what's going to happen when we save both of these files, login and index, is since we have an auth token already in local storage, when our client state's initialized, it's going to get the item from local storage, update the value of is logged in. It's going to execute our defined is logged in query when this render function runs. Then data.isLoggedIn is going to evaluate to true, so it's going to take us to the root component or the home page, however you want to view it. So let's save both of these files, and we'll navigate back to our app. You can see we're immediately taken to root.